James checking in. Good afternoon, members of council, members of staff, members of the public. This special council meeting will be getting underway momentarily. I just see another call-in user who has joined the meeting as on the attendee list. I'm just going to unmute that individual so we can identify who you are. The person that just called in by telephone, can you please identify yourself?
Good evening, Peter, Councillor Willens. I'm trying to get on my internet.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I'll note that just in case we need to use this connection for your participation today.
Yeah, I'll keep it on mute until I keep connecting. If not, I'll just stay on the phone.
Okay, thank you.
Good. There's no feedback? Maybe there is actually. How's this? Test? Test? We're getting a little bit of feedback.
Yeah, Aaron's going to just assist.
Try that. Test, test, test. Test. That's good?
Yes, that's better. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay. As we begin today's meeting, we would like to acknowledge that we are gathering here today on the treaty territory of the Mississaugas, the Credit First Nation, and before them, the traditional territory, the Haudenosaunee, Huron, and Wendat. We also acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and other global Indigenous people that now call Brampton their home. We honor to live, work, and enjoy this land. Welcome to the special council meeting of September 1st, 2021. This meeting is called for specific purpose to consider the following business. Consideration of COVID-19 vaccination policy, including related closed session business. Under council's meeting rules, no other business will be considered at this meeting. We will begin with meeting with the city clerk calling the roll for attendance at today's meeting.
Members of council, I will call your name. Please indicate your presence. Councillor Dillon has indicated he will be absent for the start of the meeting, but he will be joining as soon as possible. Councillor Singh.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Fortini.
Here. Good afternoon.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Hi, I'm here.
Thank you. Councillor Medeiros.
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Bowman.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Paleshi.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Willens. Councillor Willens, you've been unmuted.
I'm here, Peter.
Thank you. Councillor Vasante.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Santos.
Present.
Thank you. And Mayor Brown is present. There are 10 members present, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we are now at item 2, the approval of the agenda. We have a motion moved by Councillor Willens and seconded by Councillor Vasante to approve the agenda. Instead of seeking a recorded vote for this item, I will ask, is there anyone opposed to this motion? Otherwise, your vote will count in the affirmative. Are there any objections? Hearing none, the motion carries. Meetings of municipal
I'm on the
council.
speakers list, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry?
I'm on the speakers list.
Councillor
Oh,
Paleshi.
sure. Okay, 1 second. There, I see. Okay, yes, Councillor Paleshi.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to understand why it The public agenda does not list that we have 2 people in closed session that are wanting to delegate. I'd like to understand why those 2 people aren't named on the public portion of the agenda. And is it at the City of Brampton's request, or is it at the request of the delegations, is my first question. My second question is, why is it that those delegations aren't happening in public?
Actually, Councillor Pleshy, very good question. I had the same thought that the delegations from our labor organization should be in public session as well. If there was a willingness from council, we could have those delegations in public.
So I'd just like to have staff respond to my questions.
Is maybe Samir, the city solicitor, could respond to that? Would council have the right to hear those delegations in public?
Through the mayor, as the matter relates to labor relations and employee negotiations, it can it can be done in closed session, but it is the will of council if they want to do it in closed session or open. To clarify, for the portion relating to the delegations, however, the portion relating to legal advice should definitely be in closed session.
Yeah, so I would expect that the discussion around whatever the delegation's request is would happen in closed session, but I don't see a need for delegations of our main labor unions to be in closed session. So, and then was it the request by the City of Brampton, or was it the delegation's request to be enclosed?
I'll ask Peter Fay that. Peter?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, based on considerations internally, the delegation request did come in from both those collective bargaining agents, and the determination was, in accordance with what the city solicitor had mentioned, that it would be more appropriate, given the likely nature of those delegations relating to labor relations issues as they relate to the COVID-19 vaccination policy, that those be considered in closed session. But as the city solicitor has indicated, it is the will of council if they wish to hear those receive those delegations in public or in closed session.
Thanks, Peter. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move that we hear those delegations in public.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are there any objections to this? Hearing none, we can amend the agenda accordingly. We have the motion back on the floor, moved by Councillor Willen, seconded by Councillor Vasante. And this will include the labor organization delegations in public session. Anyone opposed?
And Mr. Mayor, just to clarify, there is the added delegation 6.5 that was distributed by email this morning from William Osler Health System regarding today's meeting.
Okay, thank you. Anyone opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. This takes us to, I should note, meetings of municipal councillors are to be open to the public for transparency and accountability, and our meeting will continue to be as well, with a few precautions and limitations. Members, most staff are participating electronically in this meeting. The public can still access and participate in the meetings in a number of ways. Watching this meeting remotely through the city's live stream and playback of the archive video stream, submitting questions about the agenda, business, and decisions made by council today, emailing the city clerk's office at cityclerksoffice@brampton.ca with your question, which may read into the public meeting record during the 15-minute public question period before the end of the meeting. Also continue to follow important service and public health updates through the city's website. This now takes us to item 3, declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Does any member have a declaration of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act for any matter to be considered on today's agenda? Seeing none, the clerk will so note for the meeting minutes. This takes us to 6.1, and this is discussion of the COVID-19 vaccination policy. I want to say a comment, and then I guess we get into the delegations and correspondence.
Sending them the link.
Yeah. I just want to start off by saying, there's been a broad discussion on COVID-19 vaccination policy, and if you look at the City of Toronto, they introduced a policy, the first city in Canada that was very aggressive in trying to encourage vaccinations, to the point that the Toronto policy includes terminations for those that, as a potential disciplinary action for those that don't get vaccinated. Mississauga took an approach that was more middle of the road, which encouraged vaccinations, but rather than terminations, required weekly testing for those that aren't vaccinated after taking an education course. And so there is, I understand in the GTHA, almost every municipality now has a vaccination policy, and so it is incumbent upon us to have a discussion on how we can best protect the safety of our workers. But in the spirit of the Brampton approach, we've done everything collaboratively. And I want to thank David Barrick and his team, who have been working closely with HR and our labor organizations to develop a fair policy. And at the end of the day, this is HR policy, but it's such a big issue that I wanted to make sure council's voice was heard. Mississauga had a special council meeting on this about a week and a half ago. Peel Region instituted a policy on their own without meeting with council, but that's not the way we normally do things here in Brampton. And so I wanted to make sure that every member of council has an opportunity to have their voice heard, and that our labor organizations do. And I just want to say to our labor organizations, we see you, we hear you, and we recognize your sacrifices over the last year and a half. You know, they've been unsung heroes. The transit operators that got COVID-19 in higher numbers, our first responders, frontline staff, our recreation centers, turned into vaccination centers, testing centers. It's been incredible. Everyone in this municipality has really stepped up, and I'm grateful for that. The firefighters, helping out in every way they can. It's been a team approach, and I think we've got through this pandemic, and the worst parts are hopefully in the rear view mirror, and it's because of everyone's sacrifices. So I want to thank our labor organizations, and I look forward to this collaborative discussion here today. We're all in this together, and we're going to make sure we come up with a policy, that our staff come up with a policy that is fair and reasonable and puts the safety of our employees first. So on that note, Peter, can you direct us on how we're going to go about this? And then I assume we'll have the delegations, questions for delegations, and then council can have a discussion. Is that fair to say?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, that's correct. So the meeting coordinates have been sent to the two representatives. The first delegation, who is present now, is Frank Vani, who is the president of ATU Local 1573. Frank has joined the meeting, and after Frank's delegation, as you've said, Mr. Mayor, members of council may ask questions for clarification. After that delegation has been completed, there is the second delegation from Fabio Gazzola, President CUPE Local 831, and we're just waiting for Fabio to join today's meeting. So Frank, you are present. You can unmute your mic, and it's now time to address council on this matter. You have up to 5 minutes unless council extends that. Thank you.
Good morning. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can,
We
Frank.
can hear you.
Good morning to all the councilors, Mayor Brown. Today we're talking about COVID-19 vaccinations and making them mandatory for employees of Brampton. And as the union president and labor leader, I have a few concerns when it comes to making anything mandatory. And as a union president, I cannot condone making anything mandatory for my members, including this vaccine. There's a few things that I want to talk about the vaccines and them being mandatory. Which of these vaccines has been approved for clinical use, or are they all just emergency order vaccines? And since I recognize that they haven't been approved for clinical use in Canada. I understand that there has been one in the US that's been approved for clinical use, and that's the Pfizer vaccine. But Canada hasn't done that yet. And I think that all my members should have the ability to make their own decision on whether or not they want to take this vaccine. And I don't believe that while we're during our contract, and we have an ongoing contract for the next 3 years, and considering this vaccine is not included in our contract, it would be a violation and it would be unconstitutional to enforce this vaccine on any of my members. I can't speak on other people's members, and the other unions will speak on them. But I have a concern when it comes to mandatory anything, including drug testing, alcohol testing, anything that's mandatory and it's being imposed by the employer. There's lots of questions behind it. Is the employer going to sign a letter if anybody has adverse effects to this vaccine? Are they going to sign a letter saying that they will be responsible for this person and this person's family if they happen to succumb to this vaccine and possibly pass away, or injuries which would stop them from being able to work? There's a lot of questions behind it. If we agree to testing as an alternative, who will pay for this testing? Will the city of Brampton? Will OHIP? Who will pay for the testing? How often is the testing being done? It seems that we're building a house without a foundation. We haven't, I believe even the structure of the provincial one isn't 100%. Toronto, they passed it without having any structure to it. So we're falling under the same issues here in Brampton. And I understand that Peel Region's already done it. Mississauga's already approved it, and we seem to be the only holdouts in Brampton. And I agree that we should look into it further before we implement anything that's mandatory. It's a slippery slope that we're going into here by forcing people to accept something that they don't want to accept. I am not anti-vaccine. My kids are vaccinated to be able to go to school in the city. I'm not against any medically proven clinical used vaccines, but with this one, I firmly believe that anybody that wants to get this vaccine should get it. I am not opposed to that, but what I am opposed to is anyone being forced to take this vaccine.
Okay.
I think that that's the broad strokes of my objection to this.
Okay. I imagine there could be some questions. Councillor Pelletier.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Frank, for your delegation. Frank, I'm kind of siding on your side here. I don't really support too much mandatory anything or forcing anybody to do anything. And thank you for coming and representing your members. I guess what my question to you, though, Frank, is what do you suggest we do? Because there's a number of people that I have talked to that are a little bit hesitant to work with somebody that isn't vaccinated, and it kind of goes. It's a circle that we keep when we're talking about the vaccinations to non-vaccinations and stuff. With respect to somebody that is unvaccinated and the possibility of them passing it along to somebody that is vaccinated or more of their coworkers, I guess there has to be some kind of discussion, and I'm sure that you've had that discussion. But what do you suggest the policy say for our employees?
Well, I don't. I know that this is a hard decision, and on everybody's level, this is a hard decision to make and to be either for it or against it. And I understand that there's concerns out there of people working with unvaccinated people. But if we look at the long history of vaccinations, we work with unvaccinated people every day, whether they're not vaccinated to go to school. There's parents out there that cite religious reasons or personal reasons for not having their kids vaccinated, and these kids grow up unvaccinated, and parents are unvaccinated. And we work with these people every day, all day. And it's been medically proven that even the people that have this vaccine that are double vaccinated, we'll take an example of Israel. Israel has had vaccination upon vaccination, booster shots, but yet they have an increasing population of infections through vaccinated people with booster shots. So I understand that there's people out there that are hesitant about working with unvaccinated people, but I haven't heard that from any of my members saying that they fear going to work with unvaccinated people, because the majority of our members are vaccinated. It's just I have to stand up for the rights for the rest. And maybe there is something that we can look at. Obviously, I am not. I understand that we have to do something, and that council is going to vote on it today to do something along the lines of Mississauga and Peel Region. So there's got to be, there has to be a structure or some foundation around a secondary option, or a secondary option that our members can go to.
I guess, Frank, that's kind of what I'm looking for. And you've come here before us to say, this is what you don't want, but we've always had a great working relationship with our unions. So I guess that's what I'm looking for is instead of us just, looking at the other policies that have been implemented in either the private sector or the public sector, we don't go ahead and make a decision without having the union representation's input and trying to work on getting something done that is kind of palatable for everybody.
Right. So we could, if I understand the decision is going to be made today, and I understand that we have to find a secondary or something along that we could. But testing, I believe the model is a testing model that's being thrown around, even Mississauga, Peel Region, Toronto. But if we're going to look at a testing model, then the unions, and okay, I speak for myself and my members, that we have the most or the least invasive test that there is for COVID-19, which I believe is the saliva test.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, I don't like anything up my
It's
nose
not
either.
invasive at all, and whereas the nasal swab, the nasal swab, from our experience with the testing that we've had at our transit facilities and other testing that I've seen, after 2 or 3 tests, you could cause rupture of blood vessels in the nasal cavity, and that would be a problem. So if we're looking at something where a test would be involved, we would be looking at the most or the least invasive test possible, and I believe that is the saliva test.
Okay, thanks, Frank. I appreciate your delegation answering some of the questions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a question as well, Frank, and thank you for the dedication of our transit operators during the pandemic, and my condolences for the 2 that we sadly lost. You've been on the front line of service and certainly recognized areas of concern, sometimes even before public health did. We saw that with the Amazon shutdown. So thank you. A question I have is, most cities in the GTA have instituted a vaccination policy, and wanted to know what ATU's position is going to be in those other cities. I understand that Toronto going pretty strong, suggesting terminations are possible. That will likely be challenged in the courts. Mississauga seems to have more of a middle-of-the-road policy that requires testing but not terminations. Do you know if ATU is going to challenge the Mississauga policy, or is it one that will be accepted?
Well, the position of ATU, and I can't really speak to the positions that they'll have, but I know that letters have been drafted, similar to the letter that I sent you and the councillors, stating our objection to this mandatory vaccine. I know that the 113, which is Amalgamated Transit Union 113 Toronto transit workers, I believe they've already sent a letter to the employer, and Mississauga, I believe, if they haven't sent it yet, they're sending it within the next few days, which would also be against the actual policy of mandatory testing or the framework that they've put out there now. And that's pretty much across the board, all Canadian locals, from British Columbia all the way out to Newfoundland.
Okay, are there any other questions for Frank Vanny and ATU? Hearing none, we can go. Thank you.
Councillor Santos, I have a quick question.
Okay.
So sorry.
Okay, sir.
Thank you, Frank, for coming in to delegate, and also I echo the appreciation of the transit workers and the members of your union. Just a very quick question. Do you know, and perhaps you don't know, but approximately how many folks on staff, your members, how many might be vaccinated and how many might not be, just an approximate?
I'd be lying to you if I said I knew exact numbers, but I'd probably go as far as saying about 70 to 75% of our members are vaccinated.
Okay, thank you. So really, approximately, it's around 30 to 25% that you're looking at in terms of who either timing-wise haven't been vaccinated yet, or possibly are just choosing not to be vaccinated.
Again, I don't know the exact number, but yeah, it's probably around 20 to 25%, maybe a little bit more. Again, even as the union and the president of the union, I don't ask people for their health records or to try to get that information. The employer, and I sorry, I don't mean to imply something, but the employer does have anybody that's, because people that were on their days off, that got vaccinated, they were paid for it to go on their own time, and even people that were at work. So the employer has a better record of roughly how many people were vaccinated. But I believe it's between 20 and 25% that don't really want to be forced to take this vaccination.
Okay, thanks, Frank. I just wanted to get an idea as to how many perhaps might be choosing not to, in case, to Councillor Peleshi's point, as we are all trying to prioritize safety of employees and make sure that the virus isn't spread through the workplace. But I do agree that, and I don't know if there will be a motion coming forward or if this is going to be referred back to staff with respect to coming up with an appropriate policy that makes sense for Brampton. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Peleschi.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just to follow up, Frank, a question you probably will know. Has the city of Brampton given every opportunity for the transit union workers to get vaccinated?
Well, I was with Alex's help and the employer, we were advocates of bringing volunteer vaccines to the garages. So we had 2 vaccine clinics at the Sandalwood facilities, which is our bigger facility. It's a bigger parking lot. And we were all on board with volunteer vaccines. We got them to the garages, and I believe that we were made priority at a couple of other vaccination clinics for a few days. So the city of Brampton and the employer has more than exceeded expectations when it's given my members and any city population a chance to come and get their vaccines at the Sandalwood facility.
Okay, great. Thanks, Frank. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Frank, for sharing your perspectives with us today.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council.
Our next delegate is Fabio Gazzola, President of the Canadian Union of Public Employees, Local 831.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, Fabio is joined by telephone. I just wish to confirm, Fabio, is that you on the telephone?
Yes, it is. Thank you, Peter. I do apologize. I had some challenges with the WebEx. I wish I could have logged in so everybody could have seen me, but unfortunately, I had some challenges with the WebEx. Therefore, that's the reason for calling in.
Well, thank you for joining us, and you are now before council. You can address council in regard to the COVID-19 vaccination policy.
All right. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Mayor Brown. Thank you for the opportunity. Just a quick introduction. Obviously, I do represent close to 1,200 municipal workers here at the City of Brampton. 4 different units, 3 different collective agreements, close to 265 different workers. So, our circumstances are significantly different than, say, ATU, a fire, or the library. 265 different jobs, right? Obviously, not only do we work here at the city, but they're also members of the community. And, the first point I want to kind of bring up, and I appreciate you kind of resolved part of it, we strongly object to any part of this meeting being in closed session or in camera. This, to me, lacks transparency, right? As I said, we didn't ask to delegate in camera. I want to be on record that I want residents and members to hear exactly what I have to say. And I think council should do the same. This is not a labor relations matter, right? To me, this is, appears to be a secret meeting, as one member told me. So, I definitely wanted to note that the QP has a strong objection to any portion of this being in closed camera in session, and hopefully you take that into consideration. With that being said, what you're contemplating, we feel is not reasonable. This should be a last resort. There's many other options that could have been explored in the meantime. This closely, if it does not, it closely, violates, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, right? My members, thought we, worked in a liberal democracy, right? It doesn't appear to be that way. Last week, Dr. Lowe clearly stated on the press conference with Mayor Brown that was on CP24 that this was not a public health issue. This was a workplace safety issue, which is, captured under the Occupational Health and Safety Act. We, QP workers, feel that, not feel, we're tired of being attacked and blamed for everything. Yeah, we get you did give us a bit of credit in the beginning, which is greatly appreciated, but, it appears that, workers are being blamed for spreading COVID, that we're the problem, that we need to be protected from ourselves. I asked the corporation, how many outbreaks has the city had? How many WSIB claims has the city had? If this was a workplace safety issue, you would have 1 or 2 of the above that I mentioned. As workers, we wear PPE. We follow the appropriate guidelines and policies. We do our daily active screening. How are we the problem? How are you protecting us? And I say that because, it appears there's a double standard. We as workers need to be double vaccinated, but the general public doesn't. Our facilities, similar to, ATU. ATU is a public vehicle. Are residents going to be required to be double vaccinated on a bus, or City Hall, or a rec center, or the farmer's market? they're just as, they fall into the same circumstances. So I'm really puzzled. Is this a public health measure or is this a health and safety issue? Once again, how is this protecting workers? We haven't had an outbreak and no WSIB claims. So obviously, the precautions in place right now that the corporation has had, they're working. And I would emphasize and encourage them to, continue and to be stringently monitor and enforce, and to continue what we're doing. As I said, the double vaccine should be a last resort. We don't even do temperature checks, right? It's well known that vaccines don't cure COVID. The vaccinated, individuals still have the ability to catch COVID and pass it on. So who are we protecting? You're letting, once again, contractors, whether it's third-party security, whether it's children in rec centers, whether it's the HVAC or plumbers or residents, into city facilities without the same standards and expectation. How does that make sense? It doesn't make sense to, long term, I can appreciate we can't do nothing, and CUPE is not suggesting we do nothing. We've already got some, a good base, as I said, PPE, guidelines and policies and daily active screening, and we need to continue to be diligent. CUPE is not against vaccines. We strongly encourage every worker, every citizen to make an educated decision based on their individual merits with their family, their doctors, or, pastors, priests, or reverends, or for whatever religious reasons, And then there's nothing wrong with an educated decision, but to coerce someone into, mandatory vaccines is not appropriate. We staunchly are opposed to mandatory vaccines. As Frank indicated, is the corporation going to take responsibility for adverse reaction? I know the answer. Are the drug makers going to take responsibility, or the government? No. A vaccine is a highly intrusive procedure. I could even arguably, argue that it's a medical procedure, right? So I know there's a few questions, right? And, I didn't come here to be critical. CUPE came here to, oppose the mandatory vaccines. But you know what? We also do have suggestions. We do have solutions. After all, we are on the front lines. We do the work. We do know what's going on. I would expect and encourage strongly that the corporation continue with the protective measures in place, as I've repeatedly mentioned, whether it's PPE guidelines, the daily active screening, right? We need to stop the double standard. If it's okay for workers to be vaccinated, what about everybody else? Even on the daily active screening, when contractors come in, or residents, we're taking it at face value that they've done their daily active screening, right? That's not acceptable. How about sick days for those that don't have it, like part-timers and temporaries, so that they don't come to work when they're, potentially have the virus or sick and pass it on? Part-timers and temporary and precarious workers, can't afford to go without pay for a day. I know many circumstances where members displayed symptoms, because, Frank has some members as well that don't have, sick days or sick leave, that come to work because they can't afford to be off work for a day without pay, right? Why don't we institute sick days? Or stop forcing multiple individuals into a vehicle when there's many, many vehicles sitting there idle and available, right? We're on the front lines working, So I'm really puzzled. My members are upset that there seems to be a double standard, right? That's basically our position. And once again, we strongly oppose that any portion of this special meeting be in closed session or in camera. And with that, I'll open it up if anybody has questions.
Yeah, thank you.
I'd be more than prepared to answer them.
Yeah, thank you, Fabio, for your passionate feedback. There's a number of questions. I would just add at 1 o'clock, we're going to get details on the provincial vaccination certificate program. And so some of those questions will be answered at 1 o'clock. We understand that they're going to require individuals to be vaccinated entering public spaces. And so that could apply. We'll find out whether that applies for people visiting City Hall at 1 o'clock. But we'll go to the questions. Right now the list is Councillor Pleshy, Councillor Williams, Councillor Santos, and Councillor Willens. Councillor Pleshy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Fabio, for your delegation. Fabio, you know that we are in public session, right? When we moved the motion to have the delegations move to public?
Well, the two delegations, so, yes, I know that, and I appreciate the motion you put forward to have this portion, and, we never asked to have.
Sorry, Fabio, before you go on, I just want you to be rest assured that any discussions that we have in camera will be about the direct negotiations of the contract, not, and I repeat, not on the vaccination policy. I think it's very clear that we want, you, Fabio, we want Frank, we want anybody and everybody to be at the table when we are making this decision. We don't want you guys just coming and saying, don't do this, don't do that. We want you coming, like you said, to offer up those suggestions.
And I appreciate that, and obviously my position and hesitation is, when it's in camera, so thank you for clarifying that, and, it's greatly appreciated, and I look forward, QP looks forward to the opportunity to, have that conversation and dialogue and participate. It's just when I hear any portion is in camera, there's a slight hesitation, so, thank you, Councillor Pleshy, for clarifying that.
So Fabio, I guess some of the questions that I had asked Frank, and I'm sure that your answers are similar. I don't think we disagree with you. I agree with a lot of things that you had said, and like Mayor Brown had just said, we'll find out more at 1 o'clock. I guess on the go forward though, a part of the testing, and I do not like the swab up the nose. I don't know what these rapid tests, I'm told that there's rapid tests being sold out of the pharmacies. I don't know if they're saliva or not, but is a vaccination policy moving towards more like if we move towards more of a testing for employees, is that something that you'd like to see as a policy?
I think anything reasonable in what you describe, presents choices and options, right? I'm quite well versed on what's happening in the GTA and in Ontario. I spoke to locals in Toronto, right? And you can't compare Toronto to Brampton because they have units. The municipal sector there has units that the Peel has. I spoke to representatives of QP and Peel. School boards and so forth. What you're suggesting is more than reasonable. You know what? If you're suggesting to me the option is mandatory vaccine or frequent testing, or obviously demonstrate an exemption based on human rights or religious or medical, that's three options. That's extremely reasonable. But one-stop shopping as the mandatory vaccine, you know what? QP is strongly opposed to the one-stop shopping. So if that's what you're in favor of, then absolutely, and I'd like to hear that, right? But I'm not sure what's in play right now and what's not. But what Toronto did to QP here is unreasonable. There are no options, right? So I'm not completely sure what Mississauga is doing, but from my understanding, as recent as Friday on what the Region Appeal did, they had three options. They're still working on some of the logistics and the details and so forth, which is reasonable. but absolutely, and you know, on your comment in regards to, you know, the answers are probably the same as Frank. They're not really. You know, ATU, you know, had the opportunity to go get vaccine and, you know, time off. You know, Fire, you know, was able to get all their shots on company time. QP was not offered the same arrangements. You know what? We were given some flexibility in regards to, you know, if you book it during company time, then, you know, we would cut you loose. But, you know, the same arrangements, you know, we're not across the board. You know, QP was never a priority, right? Even though our members, and as you've brought up in the past many times, you know what? 265 different job classifications. You know, I represent everybody from, you know, an outside worker, office worker, or, you know, the other professional technical, or, you know, temporaries. No two jobs are the same. And this is not to devalue what Fire and Transit do. They got a handful of jobs. I have 265 different jobs, close to 1,200 members. You know, the circumstances are significantly different from one extreme to the other. So, you know, when you mentioned, you know, were we afforded every opportunity? I wouldn't say, you know, we kind of did some stuff, but I wouldn't say we had the same opportunities as Transit and Fire, right?
Well, thanks, Fabio. You moved right into my second question, and I guess knowing that now, do you feel like you have members in the union that are not vaccinated because they haven't been awarded the time or the support by the city of Brampton to get vaccinated?
You know what? It's quite possible. I really hope it's not that's the reason, right? You know, as I said, you know, and I can't say it enough, you know, QP strongly encourages everybody to make an educated decision. I think it would be, you know, disturbing to find out that because, you know, they didn't get company time. You know, I know that, you know, when Frank and ATU and myself push for the, you know, the pop-up clinics, you know, once again, you know, thank you to, you know, to the city for doing that. That, you know, the feedback was, you know, we didn't have quite the amount of turnout that they would have liked. Well, because, you know, members weren't waiting around. You know, we strongly encourage, but, you know how many members ended up getting vaccinated the 2 weeks prior to the pop-up? If it would have been done sooner, I think we probably would have had a greater turnout, and, you know, we would probably have far less unvaccinated. It just seems it was a struggle to determine the priorities, right? And I'm not going to get into the blame game. I had quite extensive conversations with Peel Public Health, you know, and MPPs, right? And, you know, I saw a lot of finger pointing, right? And, you know, it's not the time to finger point. As I said, I didn't come here to be critical, and I appreciate and thank you for all the questions, because, you know what, we're not hiding. You know, we need to work together, but mandatory vaccines should be the last, you know, the last option. It seems like we jumped and missed a few steps.
Okay, thanks, Fabio. And I guess what we need to do, and I'll have the conversation with maybe our CEO or commissioners, is that what can we do anything now to provide that support for the members that feel that they haven't been awarded the opportunity to get vaccinated. So a different conversation, but one that should be had nonetheless. Thanks, Fabio, for your help. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
No, thank you.
Okay, our next question is Councillor Williams.
Thank you to you, Mayor. Hi, Fabio. Thanks for being here and speaking to me about how you and union members feel about being forced to vaccinate. And I do definitely share some of your thoughts on that. Nobody likes to be forced to do anything. So my question is, after hearing the comments made in speaking with Councillor Pilecki, the numbers of people that have been vaccinated, do you think that's slowed down, or do you think that people are likely to be vaccinated right now because they're feeling forced and because we haven't come out with an actual plan?
I think it's about the, as I said, my statement was not to be generic, and so it all comes down to individual circumstances and educated decisions, right? I know a lot of members that if all things were fine, would not get the vaccine because of the uncertainty, but because of family circumstances and so forth, parents, partners, children and loved ones that are high risk and vulnerable. Basically, when it comes to family, people, put their, self-interest, to the back, and look after their family. So, there's a lot of there's several circumstances where, I know for a fact that members or residents would not get the vaccines, but, they also realize that they're putting loved ones in danger, right? Because they're high risk or immunocompromised or, other significant challenges, right? So I think that's kind of, the significant point. Those that aren't getting vaccinated, for the most part, the feedback is, what are the long-term, what are the long-term effects? If you're young and, starting off in a family, does it impact, what are the long-term effects in regards to having a family, right? Obviously, there's concerns because, children under the age of 12, like 11 and below, they're not vaccinated. I had quite an interesting conversation. Someone tried to compare it to, as a child, as Frank, illustrated and pointed out, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I got every single vaccine as a kid, whether it's, the measles and the mumps and, the hepatitis and so forth. And people go, how's that different? Well, I was a kid. You gave me a vaccine, I received a vaccine as a 4 or 5 year old, right? Obviously, it was tested and the long-term effects were proven and so forth. I find that, the same challenges and issues that, parents, struggle in regards to their children, apply to, young, individuals who, whether it's for family reasons or, other underlying health issues that might be aggravated, right? So, hopefully I answer your question, I put in perspective, but that's the feedback. That's what I'm getting from members, right? With anything, there's some that are always going to be, dead set against it for whatever reason. Maybe I'm naive. I'd like to hope that, they've come to those decisions based on, an educated decision, based on research, and as I said, medical professionals, whether it's the religious, practitioners, reverends, pastors, priests, or, family. This is not a decision to be made lightly, let alone by an employer. This is a very personal choice. It's not uncommon that, at a membership meeting, my members very clearly, tell me periodically that, a union meeting, politics is not to be discussed. I think this is worse than talking about politics, right? This is a very personal, choice, protected under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, very intrusive procedure, and as I said, thank you for asking the question, and as I said, hopefully I didn't drift too much, and I answered and put it into context, Councillor.
Yeah, absolutely, Fabio. I think you said so well. It is a very personal decision that needs to be made, and I think we need to put our trust back into all of our employees to make that decision for themselves and their family. And I do think one of the ideas that are being presented is the education around, COVID vaccine and COVID virus. And I think people need to shift their thinking from if I get it to when, because I don't think COVID's going anywhere. And because of that, making sure we have all of the right information to base a good, sound decision off of is so important, because I echo your sentiments. People need to make sure that they're doing this for the reasons that they are comfortable with, confident in, and are able to do it for them, feeling for. So I appreciate your comment, and I'm listening to them. I think I asked Frank the same question as well, because I think it's important for us to understand what is driving the decision to be vaccinated and what is driving the decision to not be vaccinated, and make sure we consider those points in our decision. Thank you so much, Fabio. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you very much, Councillor.
Okay, our next question is Councillor Santos.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, and thank you so much, Fabio, for coming to delegate today on behalf of your members. And your members have been doing an amazing job for the city of Brampton, for sure. And if we haven't given CUPE members enough credit, then I'll be the first to say thank you, and we appreciate all of your work. I asked the same question of Frank. So just so I get an idea, or we get an idea, do you have kind of an approximate range of folks within CUPE who are vaccinated or unvaccinated?
Similar to Frank, I'll throw out a number that, so the city, through, BMO, and I appreciate all the work that the group that, they've always been available, Brampton Emergency Measures Office, in regards to the bulletin. So I know the one fact or the percentage, I think they, through Peel Public Health, kind of identified that about 60, I think it was 60 point something % of the population in Peel is vaccinated. And that was based on last week's bulletin, right? So I would, I don't ask members, as I said, I think it's a taboo question. If someone volunteers, then, I'm more than willing to have a conversation. But I think it's always, a question that would be inappropriate for me to initiate. So I don't know the exact, but, what I'm getting at is I think, the workforce is, an accurate reflection of, residents in Peel. So I would be, quite confident saying that, it's closer to the 60 point something % that was published in the bulletin last week through Peel Public Health guidelines. As I said earlier on, not only do we work here, with residents, so I think we're quite a diverse group here in CUPE. Not only background, but in job classifications, as I emphasized, there is 260. So I think it would be pretty close. I would be shocked if it differed one way or another, but I think that the 60% would appear to me to be kind of pretty accurate.
Okay, thank you, and I will agree with you that and I think everyone agrees as well that this, or most, I won't speak for everyone, but myself, that it is a health and safety issue for sure. And you mentioned that you have ideas and suggestions on how to improve things. And so now I'm going to ask a question of the CAO. Is there an openness, I guess? I'm sure there is, but I'll just ask point blank. Is there an openness to kind of continue a conversation with our union partners to strengthen our policy while balancing the interests of those members who at this point in time do not want to necessarily get vaccinated? And that's a question for the CAO. For example, Fabio brought up temperature checks for CUPE members. That's another means of protecting everybody from the virus. And also, there's a lot of talk about education. And I'm wondering if when moving forward, developing the policy, because we all agree that we need one, we need something. If there's perhaps an education component that the city can include, that perhaps the unions can also agree on as well, in terms of education about the virus and education about the vaccine itself. So that's a question to the CAO.
Thank you, Councillor Santos. Through the mayor, absolutely, yes. Unlike some other municipalities you may have seen of or heard, the City of Brampton have been committed to consultation with our union partners. We've had several conversations and meetings with our union partners, not only on this, but a variety of issues, and are committed to continuing that dialogue through the formulation of this policy. The meeting today is primarily to solicit feedback from council in this process in terms of formulating the policy. And there's certainly additional discussion we can have enclosed along with our legal advice and third-party legal advice in terms of what some of the options are moving forward as well.
And then another question is, depending on what this announcement is going to be from the province within the next few minutes, and I guess a signal to the chair, Mr. Mayor, perhaps we wait for that announcement and recess, I don't know, to hear what that is before we go into closed session and discuss. But, you know, I think moving forward, you can hear, I guess our union partners, you can hear from this council and from city staff team that there is the flexibility not necessarily to go the route that Toronto did. And I really appreciate the conversation and debate today and hearing from the union partners. Certainly, I've learned a lot just in this meeting alone. So thank you. I have no further questions, but I am interested to see what that provincial announcement is and potential impacts on any policy moving forward.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Santos. And I imagine by the time we come back into public session, we will have all the details of the provincial announcement, which is happening as we speak. Councillor Willens.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Fabio and Frank, for coming in, and thanks, Fabio. I know you're passionate about your members and that. Just a quick question. I won't drag it because you've answered most of the other questions of the councillors, but just a quick question. Have you reached out to all the employees, all the members of your union? You know, the 265 jobs, different jobs you speak of. You do have quite a variety of jobs. To reach out to make sure how they feel, because my biggest concern are those that have voluntarily got vaccinated, and now the concern is not knowing if someone's been tested positive or negative and getting into a same workplace with them. That's my concern, because there's a lot of employees, I think there's more than 60% out there of your members that haven't vaccinated. And that's a concern I have, because you mentioned, you know, the ill effects of what vaccinating might do to those that don't want to get the vaccination. But what about the effects that a person that is fully vaccinated and carries that home, like Councillor Pelletier had alluded to, that they can still carry that home, or they can carry it to family members that may not be vaccinated yet, or may have health issues that they can't get vaccinated. They're bringing that home. They're going to be, hopefully in this discussions we're going to have, that will be brought up as well. But I agree with you. You know, it is a people's choice, Fabio, absolutely. And I just want to thank you for coming in again, and always being supportive of what we're trying to do here at the City of Brampton. So thanks very much.
No, and no, thank you very much, and I appreciate the question. And you know, it's you know, absolutely, it's you know, a great question. You know, have I reached out to every single member? No. We do. You know, we have membership meetings no different than council has meetings once a month, and you know what? I don't leave and go home until every question's answered. You know, members. You know, I've had many conversations with both sides, right? So when I take the position, I'm quite confident, extremely confident that you know, it's a reflection of the members, because I talk to both. I don't want to avoid questions. You know, some members, you know, don't like my answers, but you know what? I think my answers are always clear, and you know, I've never been accused of being unclear or you know, sit on the fence, right? So when you bring that up, it's a valid question, but you know, back to the double standard. How's that different than letting residents unvaccinated into, you know, currently right now, you know, there's facilities that we're allowing pod sitting for them to take mask tests while they attend events. You know, there's facilities where, you know, we're having large group functions. There's facilities that are performing exercises, whether it's swimming or working out in the gym without masks, right? So, you know, when that member says, well, I don't want to work with someone who's unvaccinated, you know, I always start, and it's not to be difficult. I ask, like, you know, have you got the vaccine? Yes. So obviously you believe in the vaccine, yes. So you feel protected, yeah. So then what's the issue? Like, are they almost like, are you acknowledging right now that the vaccine is insufficient because it doesn't protect you? That's precisely the point. So like, it's, you know, we're going back and forth, and you know, I get it, because you know, some people will say, well, Fabio, you know, we can't do nothing. Well, I would strongly disagree that, well, I'm not suggesting we do nothing. We've already done quite a significant amount, and it's worked. And I'm big on stats. And the statistics are: have we had a workplace? And I'm not going to beat it and point fingers at other businesses, because it would be inappropriate for me to identify other businesses and where there are outbreaks. There's many well documented organizations and businesses here in Brampton that had outbreaks. How many outbreaks in the city of Brampton have? None. Back to how many WSIB claims have there been in regards to COVID transmission, because it is a workplace issue? None. So, I'm glad to hear that, the appropriate measures in place have been working. And just because they've worked doesn't mean we should, let up and get slack. We need to be reminded. And, that's why, I'm thankful for the opportunity to, participate in delegates and have this conversation and so forth. And, it's a reminder that, we can't let up, and that, what we have in place needs to be enforced, for the safety of all, right? And there are other enhancements, as I said, whether it's, testing, regular testing, or temperature checks, right? Because, I get it. But, once again, the vaccines, don't cure COVID, right? Everybody has the potential. So, whether it's, the appropriate medical grade masks, the hand sanitizing or frequent washing and the social distancing, and not forcing multiple people into a vehicle when there's ample vehicles sit in a yard and available. Like, we need to be smart about this, right? And I think that we have, and I'm not suggesting that we don't, throw in up the ante in regards to precaution, but to say that mandatory vaccines is next, that's the last resort, right? And I don't think we're there, right? But, as I said, I appreciate the question and the opportunity to provide the feedback, and hopefully I answered. As I said, I have a membership meeting tonight, and I got a funny feeling it's going to be a long one, right? And every member, is able to, ask a question, participate, and, and as I said, it's going to be a hot topic tonight.
Yeah, thank you, Fabio, and I'm not implying that you haven't done your job, that you guys have stepped up and made sure the employees are safe, and hopefully you can reach out to as many members you can and ask that question, what their thoughts are on the vaccinated, run-tested fellow employees, because it is important that the next steps, we got to make sure we continue to keep our employees safe and continue to do so. So whatever we can come up with through the process, it's great. But again, thanks a lot for coming in.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Williams. I don't see any other questions. So this, do we have an added delegation?
That's it.
Okay. Okay, that completes our delegations. Would now be, we need a motion to receive the delegations. Moved by Councillor Santos, seconded by Councillor Willens to receive the delegations. Anyone opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Now we have the correspondence.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, that's correct. There's correspondence items 6.2 through to 6.5. And unless there's questions, council could take it as one motion to receive all sets of
Has all members of council had a time to read the correspondence?
Yep, I'm good.
Okay. So a motion to receive the correspondence, moved by Councillor Santos, seconded by Councillor Willens. Anyone opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. This takes us to number 7, public question period. Are there any questions?
Mr. Mayor and members of council, no questions have been received in the clerk's office.
Okay, so now it's appropriate for us to go into closed session. We can get the third-party legal advice, and then we can return in public session. Make sense? And council can have a final discussion on this, and if any motions are being put forward, we can deal with them at that time. Make sense, Peter?
Mr. Mayor, yes. So just to clarify, there were two reasons, two separate items for closed session. One is 8.1, open meeting exception under the Municipal Act for labor relations or employee negotiations. The second is 8.2, advice that's subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. I just wish to clarify, is it still council's will to go in on both of those or just the second one?
I believe it's just 8.2. Councillor Bowman?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just confirming, did you say we're getting third-party legal advice on this? Not our own legal advice?
I believe there's third-party legal advice available to the city.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So, Mr. Mayor, then I'd suggest then that we're going into closed session for 8.2, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, COVID-19 vaccination policy.
Mr. Mayor?
Okay. Moved by, sorry, did someone say they'll move it? I heard a voice.
No, I went on the board to say that we should be going in for both.
Okay. Okay, we can go in for both. Moved by Councillor Pelletier, seconded by Councillor Bowman. Anyone opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. The meeting will be recessed. We'll meet in committee boardroom 4H. Members of council can join the closed session virtually, assigned to you by the clerk. To the members of the public watching today's meeting, all meetings must start and end in public session. After closed session is completed, council will reconvene in public session. Reporting out on any actions arising from the closed session meeting will occur in public. Passing and confirming bylaw to confirm the proceedings and decisions from this meeting and adjourning the meeting. Okay, so Peter, how long would you like?
10 minutes would be helpful.
10 minutes. It's 1:12. We'll meet at 1:22 in closed.
Just before we begin, I'm just going to confirm the members of council I see present in the session. I see Councillor Williams, Councillor Willens, Councillor Singh, Councillor Bowman, Councillor Medeiros, Councillor Pelletier, Councillor Fortini, Councillor Santos, Councillor Visante, Councillor Singh, I may have skipped over you, my apologies, and Mayor Brown is present in the chamber. Councillor Dillon still has not joined the meeting. from being absent. And Mr. Mayor, you do have a quorum present, and we can proceed in open session.
Okay, well, welcome back to welcome back to open session. I think the first question is, do we have a briefing available on the provincial announcement? And specifically, I know they've announced a vaccine certificate will be required for a long list of everything from gyms to restaurants to events and meeting spaces, a long list of what's eligible, but how it affects municipalities. And so this may make our entire conversation redundant. Is there someone on the line who can answer whether the provincial policy applies to municipal event spaces and municipal public spaces, municipal recreation?
So thank you, Mayor. I believe Isa may be on the line. She's the acting director for Blaine's vacation coverage today. I'm just checking to see if she's on and can speak to this.
I see in the provincial notes here, it says that it doesn't apply for children under 12 going to a recreation facility because they're not eligible for vaccines yet. But is that private recreation or public recreation?
So I would ask the clerk, perhaps Isa is available. She's just not on as a panelist, if that's something that maybe technically we can allow her in to speak to this meeting.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't see Aisa present at the moment.
Okay, in lieu of that, just from time's perspective, perhaps Jason Tamming from our communications team, I know they've had a good review of that as well. Perhaps Jason is available that can speak to it.
Hi, David. Yes, I can give a brief update to council through the chair. Are you just looking for an overview or specific questions with respect?
So maybe I can go to Paul Morrison if he can help while you're looking at this, because I know
I've got it up, Mayor. I'm just curious if there's a specific question, or would you just like a walkthrough on the...
No, not a walkthrough, it's a specific question. The question was, does this apply to municipal facilities? If someone's visiting a municipal facility, do they have to have proof of vaccination? And so if someone's going to enter, the province has event space and recreation, does that apply to us? Because that may make the discussion somewhat redundant.
Perhaps I'll look for it as the conversation continues.
Yeah, I believe that will dictate the tone of the conversation.
Well, Mr. Mayor, it is Paul Morrison here. Permission to speak?
Please.
So, in what we're interpreting from what the press conference has released and what we're reading on the ministry fact sheet, it looks like we would be included as a public space because our facilities are used by the public. And if you read a little bit more into it, it even covers us off as the speaking notes say, proof of vaccination would not be required for employees as we have a screening and policy set up for vaccination, or for vax policy, which means in our interpretation, and this is just an interpretation at this point by enforcement, if you come to our facility, you would have to be double vaccinated to use the pool, the racquetball courts, etc. But not necessarily our employees would have to be vaccinated in the sense that we do have a policy because we have a screening process they go to before they come into work. So, but I will caution all of that by saying that what the province puts out right now is only their statements, and we have found that their statements are not entirely consistent with what the regulations are when they release the regulations, and we probably will not see those for days.
Thank you. So if the province is saying that employees and visitors have to meet this new requirement, that would make this entire conversation redundant. I know staff have a motion prepared. Maybe we could put it on the board, and maybe it could be amended to include the provincial, to be consistent with the new provincial policy.
Mr. Mayor, we're going to bring that motion up.
And
just
Councillor
momentarily.
Santos. Councillor Santos, followed by Councillor
Thank
Paletti.
you. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just having a hard time getting off mute. So I think that whatever the province does in terms of what they mandate or don't mandate. But I do think that as a corporation, as a workplace environment, we still have a responsibility, obviously, in working with our union partners and staff, et cetera, to come up with some sort of workplace policy, because the province may decide today that vaccines should be mandated, and devil's in the details in terms of what is exempted and what is not. But it's possible, similar to what they did with the police issue and the playground issue, that they might start to walk things back. And so if that's the case, then I think we should do what we can do as a workplace, and still strengthen the policy that we have or lack thereof. And if possible, staff should come back with what that might look like for us. Oh, and there's the motion right there. And I'd be happy to move it if no one else wants to move it.
Okay, moved by Councillor Santos. I believe Councillor Medeiros had mentioned he would be happy to second. I think we need to have in here that it's consistent with the provincial vaccine certification policy. So maybe endorses the ongoing development of an administrative plan as outlined by staff, consistent with the provincially announced vaccination certification policy for the implementation of a COVID-19 vaccination policy, something like that. So while the clerk is working on wordsmithing this, Councillor Santos, are you complete?
Thank you.
Councillor Paletti.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I think I'm looking for some rewording in here as well, with respect to calling it a vaccination policy. If you want to leave vaccination policy in there, but I want to give staff the opportunity to put either implement or bring forward for council's consideration a vaccination policy or testing policy or negative test result policy, something to the effect. And then you continue to keep in the details from the province of Ontario, because essentially if the province of Ontario's announcement's very new, and I think Councillor Santos is right, things can get walked back. So I think having in there some kind of screening policy and maybe touch on, have the discussions with our union heads to talk about some of those things that they had mentioned, in particular the one item about vehicles not being run and employees put into one vehicle together.
Yeah, by screening, Councillor Paletti, do you mean testing, right?
Testing, yes.
Yeah, so replace screening with testing.
Or results.
Yeah. Similar to Mississauga, yeah. Councillor
Like a vaccine protocol, almost.
Yeah.
Maybe that touches on a lot of things, but I do want the conversation to be around, some of the things that the union leaders had mentioned as well. When we're implementing this, or when we're bringing the report back to council. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Bowman.
Thank you very much. I agree with Councillor Palashi. One of the things I was going to mention was calling this a protocol rather than a policy, because again, sometimes we're not going to be saying that a person has to show a vaccination policy. They may have a reason why they don't have a vaccination or they can't get a vaccination. So then it's more of a protocol around how we handle that. Secondly, I quickly scanned over the announcement, and unless I'm missing something, and maybe Jason can tell me, I think that this announcement is sort of leaving all employee protocols up to the municipalities. I don't think they mention specifically employees in any of the stuff that they've put out. Jason, can you comment on that?
Thanks, Councillor. I don't see any, I've read through the release a few times. I don't see any reference to employees, and similar to Dr. Lowe's correspondence, and I'd look to legal to comment, but it sounds like it's up to each workplace to kind of determine the occupational health and safety factors for their workplace.
Yeah, thanks. And that's why I think, we need to work very closely with the unions to find something that's appropriate for all non-union employees, all union employees, and that works with anybody who happens to be utilizing any of our services or upfront face-to-face services. So thanks very much.
Okay. Any other questions? And last chance to, I guess we're hearing from Jason and Paul. We don't have the details yet, but I imagine our administration will make it consistent with this new provincially announced policy. And I know from past announcements, as Commissioner Morrison said, the details come out in the regulations that follow in the days after. But this certainly gives staff the ability to set up a policy that is consistent with our neighbors in Caledon and Mississauga, and do everything we can to put our employees safe. And so we have the motion on the floor, moved by Councillor Santos, seconded by Councillor Medeiros. Is there anyone opposed? Maybe take a recorded vote, since it's an important topic.
A recorded vote has been requested. All in favor, please indicate. Councillor Dillon still appears to be absent. Councillor Singh. Councillor Singh. I'll come back to you. Councillor Fortini. Councillor Fortini.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Medeiros.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Bowman.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Palashi.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Willens.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Vasante.
Yes, in favor.
Thank you. Councillor Santos.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Singh.
I'm a yes.
Thank you. Mayor Brown.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, that motion carries unanimously with the members present 10-0.
Okay. That completes our business today.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, perhaps before we go to the confirming bylaw, just to report out from closed session. Yes. In terms of council's deliberations in closed session, I just wish to report for the meeting record that council did move into closed session for two items, 8.1 and 8.2. And in both matters, they were considered together in closed session. Information was received and no direction was given during closed session. So we can move on now to the confirming bylaw.
Okay. The confirming bylaw, moved by Councillor Vasante, seconded by Councillor Fortini, that the following bylaw be before council on its regular meeting of September 1st, 2021, be given the required number of readings, taken as read and signed by the mayor and city clerk, and the corporate seal affixed thereto. Bylaw 182, 2021, to confirm the proceedings of council at its regular council meeting held on September 1st, 2021. Anyone opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Next up is adjournment, moved by Councillor Santos and seconded by Councillor Medeiros. The council do now adjourn to meet again for a regular meeting of council on Wednesday, September 15th, 2021 at 9:30 a.m. or at the call of the mayor. Anyone opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries and we are adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of council, this meeting is now adjourned. We're just going to wait for the live stream to end.